This is video 63-2. We're going to be learning about the circumference and area of a circle, and I'm assuming that you've learned some of this already in the past, so this should be review. First of all, a circle looks like this. All points in a circle have the same distance from the center to the outer part. The center is the point that's inside the circle. That's the same distance from all points outside the circle. The distance between the center and any point of the circle would be what we would call the radius. There's many radiuses, infinite number of radiuses. The diameter is the distance across the midpoint, completely across the circle. The circumference is the measure of the distance around the circle, and the area is the inside of the circle. So all of this should have been review. Now we're going to use two formulas. One is the circumference of a circle, which is, there are two you can use. One is pi times diameter, and the other is 2 radius times pi. So if you think about a circle, you could take the radius times 2, so you could take 2 radiuses times pi and get the circumference, or you could just take the diameter, which is the entire length, or 2 radiuses times pi. The area, you need to use the radius squared times pi. Now, for many of these, we're going to leave our answers in terms of pi. The reason we're going to do that is because pi is an approximation, and if we leave it in terms of pi, it's actually a more accurate answer. Okay? So I'm going to show you both ways of doing this. So to start, we're going to look for the circumference of a circle. It says here to use 3.14 or 22/7 per pi. Alright? So to start, we know that diameter times pi equals circumference, or that pi times 2 radiuses also gives us circumference. For this particular circle, we know the diameter, so we're going to use this formula. So it's actually 30 pi would be the answer to the circumference in terms of pi. Now, if I wanted to use 3.14, I could create what's called an approximation, which would be 30 times 3.14, or 94 meters. And that would also give me the circumference. But this one is an approximation, where this is actually not. All right, let's look at our next one. Again, we have the diameter. Okay, diameter pi is circumference, so it would be 56 pi would be the answer. Or if you want to find an approximation, you could multiply 56 times 3.14 and get approximately 176 inches, if I was to round it to the nearest inch. Now this one, we know the radius. So we're going to use 2 pi r, or 2 radiuses times pi. So 39 times 2 times pi. Alright, so in a way you're finding the diameter, which would be 78 pi, or an approximation of this would be 245 feet would be our circumference, and it's an approximation. Alright, sometimes you'll know the circumference of your circle, and it's going to ask you to find the radius and the diameter. Now this one's a little different. Again, I know that my circumference, or 63, equals diameter pi. Alright, I need to use my transformation principle, so I'm going to divide both sides by pi. So my diameter is actually 63 over pi, okay? Or if I divide that out and use 3.14 for pi, I would get that my diameter is approximately 20 meters. All right, now my radius we know is half of that. So if I divide that by 2, then my radius is approximately 10 meters. And that would be my answer. Here's another one. We know the circumference is 132. That's going to equal diameter times pi. If we divide both sides by pi, or 3.14, we will get the diameter equals approximately 42 inches, which means my radius would be approximately 21 inches, and that would be my answer. So we can do it, we can find the circumference by finding diameter times pi or radius times pi, or we can find our diameter and radius when we start with our circumference by dividing by pi. Now let's start to use the formula for the area of a circle. This is pi r squared equals area. Okay, now notice this is radius squared, not 2 radius. 2 radius equals our diameter, but radius squared does not equal our diameter. We have our diameter here, and we're going to need to find our radius. So we're going to take 25 and divide it by 2. That would give us 12.5 equals our radius. So now we can take radius squared, or 12.5 squared, pi, and that should give us the area of our circle. All right, if we multiply this out, 12.5 squared gives us 156.25 pi. Centimeters squared would be our area of this particular circle. All right, now if we multiplied this by pi, we could get an approximation of our area, which should be 491 centimeters squared. All right, here's another one. This one though, we already know the radius. So we can take 27 squared pi, or we can get 729 pi yards squared would be an accurate answer. Or if you want to find an approximation, we could multiply 729 times 3.14, and we would get 2,289 yards squared is an approximation of the area of that particular circle. Now let's look at this one. 84. Again, radius squared times pi gives us area. All right, that would give us 7,056 pi feet squared. Or if we want an approximation, we could get 22,156 feet squared if we took this and multiplied it by 3.14. And that would be an approximation for our area of that particular circle. All right. Now, just like for circumference, sometimes you'll know the area and you're trying to find the radius and the diameter. Now this is a little more interesting because we're going to be dealing with square roots. All right, so if we know our area is 3,018 feet squared, and that's going to equal radius squared pi, we need to find out what radius is. So we're going to use our transformation principle for division and divide both sides by pi. All right. This will give us, if we use 3.14, 961 equals radius squared. But I really want to know what just radius is. So I'm going to find the square root of both of these. Because the square root and squared are inverse operations, I'm left with r, and I would get approximately 31 feet equals our radius. Okay, that means that our diameter would be twice that, or 62 feet would equal our diameter. Now, here's a story problem. A manhole cover has a diameter of 24 inches. Find the circumference of the manhole cover to the nearest inch. All right, 24 is our diameter times pi, or 24 pi, is our circumference. It's asking for us to do it to the nearest inch, so we're going to multiply 24 times 3.14, and we would get an approximation of 75 inches. Now this one's kind of interesting. It says find the shaded area of the basketball court to the nearest foot. All right. In a way, we have two shapes here. We have a rectangular shape, and then we have a half circle. Okay, but we have another half circle over here, so we're really dealing with a whole circle. All right. Let's just think about the circle. Our circle has a diameter of 12 feet. You see that here. That's this distance here. All right. So to find the area of those two half circles, we're going to take 6 feet, which is our radius, and multiply it, square it, and multiply it by pi to get the area of the circle. Well, 6 squared is 36 pi. All right. 36 pi is approximately 113 feet squared. All right, now we need to find the area of our rectangles. Well, our rectangles are 19 by 12, and there are 2 of them. All right, if we multiply 19 times 12 times 2, we'll get 456 feet squared. All right, we need to add the 2 of these together, which would give us 569 feet squared. This is the end of video 63.2 on circumference and area of circles. You're done with your homework.